making sure that they have those best practices is going to ensure that they feel seen, they feel heard, and their needs as a listener are met. So where can you bring in some best practices for your niche? So there are always going to be ways that you can kind of tweak these and use these to come up with very basic concepts and basic things that you can attest to and speak out about as an industry leader and as an expert in this field. Welcome to another episode of Listeners to Leads, where I'm helping podcasters launch and maintain a lead generating show. I'm your host, Alicia Galati, the CEO and head podcast strategist behind Galati Media, a full-service podcast management company. On this show, you'll hear my guests and I discuss everything it takes to launch a successful podcast and keep it running. If you're ready to get leads, land speaking gigs, and create deeper connections with your audience through your podcast, then this is the show for you. Over the last few weeks, we've been talking about podcast launching and focusing really heavily on the launch strategies and the launch part of your podcast. Now, this week I want to talk about how to plan out the first 10 or more episodes of your podcast. So we're going to go through 10 possible ideas and some strategies and tips and tricks that you can use to plan out those first 10 episodes. These strategies are also great for planning out your next 10 episodes. So if you are not a new podcaster, but you're still like, whoa, I need help, then you can still use these strategies to plan out your next 10 episodes. Before we get into that, I want to remind you about one of our past episodes, which was titled 5 Strategies to Never Run Out of Podcast Content. I'm going to run through those really quickly so that we kind of keep those top of mind, because these are still some really great strategies for planning out your initial episodes, but also planning out the next 10 episodes that you're kind of creating. The first one is to do some extensive competitor and market research. You can look on Pinterest, Quora, Reddit, social media, Google, and Answer the Public. Those are going to be some really great places to get an idea of what competitors are talking about and also get an idea of how you can show up a little different and maybe share some controversial ideas and thoughts with your audience. The second one is to ask your audience. So always going to them, asking them, what do you want to hear about? What are you struggling with? That's going to help you as well. The third is to plan out your content. So making sure that you are actually taking the time and the effort to come up with ideas and come up with things that you want to talk about. Fourth is to tell about success and failures that you have experienced. And then the fifth is to repurpose other content. So other places where you have been showing up, sharing knowledge and dropping gems. Maybe that's another podcast that you were on and you shared something really valuable and you want to bring that to your audience on your show. So those are 5 strategies to never run out of podcast content. Now that we have those in mind, we're going to take a second to really think about, okay, you are about to launch your show. Let's plan out these first 10 episodes. First things first, you need to make sure that you have your content buckets, which we've talked about before. And I feel like we talk about this on every episode, but those are your pillars. These are the things that you are always going to go back to, the content that is the very foundation of what you're talking about with your audience. So you're going to use that to help you kind of filter out, okay, these are the top things that I am going to talk about. Using an example that we talked about a few weeks ago, so say that I am running a dog training business and I want to launch a podcast that's all for dog training. All right, so the content buckets for that dog podcast, the dog training podcast, was training strategies, so going over some of those, dog food, toys, and products, doggy how-tos, and tips for new and experienced dog owners. So all of my content needs to be focused around those initial things. My first episode is going to be my trailer. Within the trailer, you're going to make sure that you talk about who you are, some of your credentials. You're also going to mention the podcast name, which we want to do for Google purposes and search engine optimization. then you're also going to share what kind of content the audience can expect. You've already done that market research. You already know exactly what it is that you're going to be talking about with your audience. So you can use this market research that you've already done, these strategies that you've already implemented, and this launch plan to then, okay, these are the first 10 episodes. But in the trailer, you can know, I already know what I'm going to talk about in these first 10 episodes. Now that you've had that planned out, you can then utilize that in your trailer as, hey, this is what you can look forward to. So your first episode is going to be your trailer. You're going to cover those things that I just mentioned. Your next 4 to 5 episodes are going to be core principles and core, like cornerstone type content. Cornerstone content is typically the most important core content that is in your website. And so these are your best, most important articles. They're the things that you always want people to go to for those like basic level information. So that is what you're going to use. With that in mind, all right, these initial 4 to 5 episodes, I am going to give very basic, high level information about each of these content pillars. So here are some examples, and I have listed out 10 potential episodes. I also went to some of the dog training podcasts from my market research. I am not a dog trainer at all. Obviously, I run a podcast management company, but these are some very practical, basic things that as a dog owner, I would want to know these. So first one is going to be your trailer. Second episode, what is a dog trainer and how to choose one? So if you are a life coach, a productivity coach, a sales strategist, if you are a thought leader, any of these things, you can say, what is a fill in the blank with your title and how to choose one. Maybe you're a Pinterest strategist. What is a Pinterest strategist and how to choose one for your business? These are very basic, high-level things that people are going to be searching for online. And now that Google is indexing podcasts by episode, you can use this as a very quick and easy, down and dirty way to come up with topics for your show. Second episode I have listed here is everything you need to know about feeding your dog. It has to do with one of my pillars. One of my pillars was dog food, toys, and products. So I'm pulling in from that. I could literally do another episode about dog toys, which I do have one in here, and we'll talk about that a little later. Episode 4, I have listed as how to know if you're ready for a new dog. Very beginner, what would someone need to know in order to potentially work with you? So thinking about these types of questions are going to help you come up with your first 10 episodes, or if you haven't even covered these topics yet on your podcast, these are your next 10 episode ideas. So use these strategies, use these questions that I'm asking to really allow you to come up with ideas for yourself. If you do come up with ideas, I would love to know. Make sure that you come and tag me on Instagram or send me a DM. I'm always interested in hearing how you guys are able to implement these strategies and these tips and these tricks, because yes, it's great to hear them, but I want you to take action. Number 5 on my list of the first 10 episodes for this dog training podcast is 3 things to teach your new dog. Now, I don't have this specified by new puppy or new foster dog or rescue pup. I don't have it specified to that because I can always cover those later, or I can have a guest on the show who can speak specifically about things to teach your new rescue, foster, or puppy. So I'm still leaving it broad enough that I don't feel super overwhelmed or like I need to cover so much in this episode. Make it super high level. Remember that this is your cornerstone content. These are the very basic things you want to make sure you cover. The reason that we do this is because we can build on this stuff later. We have a client that we're working on launching a limited series with right now, and they're not really sure if they want to continue after the limited series. And so we're working on planning out these episodes with them, but they're feeling a little overwhelmed because there's so much that they want to cover. And so I said, look, let's make sure we leave these initial episodes very high level. And then you can always create seasons around breaking down each of these initial 10 topics that you've already pulled and the main categories that you're wanting to discuss. So that's a strategy that you can use. Don't feel like you have to be continuously producing if you don't want to. That's okay. We have an episode coming up soon. I believe it'll be coming live after this episode, where we are talking about limited series and mini series and how to utilize those to really make the most of your show and be very strategic with it. Number 6 on my list is best practices for crate training. So this is a selling point for dog owners. They want to know, all right, I need to go to the store. I need to go to work. Crate training is important for some dog owners. Making sure that they have those best practices is going to ensure that they feel seen, they feel heard, and their needs as a listener are met. So where can you bring in some best practices for your niche? Number 7 on these initial 10 episodes is 5 ways to keep your dog occupied while at work. So maybe for your podcast, if you're a Pinterest strategist, like we mentioned before, you can say 5 ways to keep your pins alive for a longer time, or 5 ways to increase the life cycle of a pin. I don't know enough about Pinterest to make this intelligent, so I'm sorry in advance. To all of my Pinterest strategists out there, I love you. What you do is incredible. I love searching Pinterest, but obviously I don't know the exact lingo on how to do this. That is an idea for how to keep in mind something that your clients might be curious about or wondering about. And remember, your episodes don't have to be very long. If you only have 10 minutes worth of things to say about it, then say your 10 minutes. Don't feel like you have to have an hour-long show or a 45-minute show or a 30-minute show if that's not your style. Come up with something that feels good to you, feels right for you, and you're able to still produce something that is valuable for your audience and gets the point across that they can then implement it. So number 7 was 5 ways to keep your dog occupied while at work. Number 8 is creating healthy relationships with your dog. So this is going to be important because we're building on one of our core content pillars or content buckets, which is tips for new and experienced dog owners. So creating a healthy relationship with your dog is going to be important for new dog owners as well as experienced ones, because maybe they got a new dog and they're not really sure how to build that relationship, but they've had a dog in the past. Another example for this is if you're a life coach or let's use the example of a relationship coach. I recently met a woman who helps divorced women, and she's a life coach for divorcees. So for her podcast, she could talk about creating healthy relationships with dating prospects or creating a healthy relationship with yourself after a divorce. So there are always going to be ways that you can kind of tweak these and use these to come up with very basic concepts and basic things that you can attest to and speak out about as an industry leader and as an expert in this field. Number 9 is leash tips and tricks for dog owners. So with this one, it goes back to those dog food, toys, and products content pillars. It also comes back to the training strategies content pillar as well. What kind of leashes do people need? What are some tips and tricks for picking out the best leash? Do you need a harness as well? These are all questions that people are Googling and looking for. So make sure that if you're talking about these, you put those questions right in those show notes. That way Google can pull them as, hey, this is what this episode is covering. So maybe you have, as a thought leader in the marketing space, yours is marketing tips and tricks for new business owners or marketing tips and tricks for established business owners. So there are 2 episodes right there that you can use and pull from, which is why I say these initial ones are just to get the ball rolling. They're just to kind of get those ideas started, and then you can always build on them later. Number 10, I have dog daycare and picking the best one for your dog. This goes back to the doggy how-tos and tips for new and experienced dog owners. Also, as a dog trainer, like I said, I'm not a dog trainer, but in this pretend world where I'm creating this pretend podcast about dog training, as a dog trainer, it would be great for me to partner with a doggy daycare. So then I can promote them. Perhaps I can bring a local doggy daycare owner on the show to talk about what to expect from a doggy daycare, what that looks like, things to look for when you are trying to decide on one. But from my perspective in this episode, I'm going to talk about what I know as a dog trainer and doggy daycare and how to pick the best one for your dog. So maybe you are a copywriter and you are talking about the main copy items that you need for a new website. And then later on, you can have a web designer on your show to talk about and to almost co-host about different copy that is needed for a new website build. So these are just some examples and ideas of ways that you can pull from your core pillars, from your cornerstone content and your content buckets to really ensure that you are covering the main things that need to be covered in those initial 10 episodes. Now, notice that I didn't even have any guest episodes in this list yet. Also notice that these weren't titled anything confusing. The listener can go on my podcast page, go to their Spotify, their Apple Podcasts, whatever, and they can very easily and quickly determine if this episode is what they want to learn about today. I used words like what is, everything you need to know about, how to, 3 things, best practices, 5 ways, creating a healthy, tips and tricks, and topic plus picking the best one for your dog. These are words that you would use to create a new blog post or words that you would use to describe main topics and things that your clients, that your potential clients are actually searching for on Google. So utilize those strategies, utilize this information to come up with your next 10 podcast episodes or your first 10 podcast episodes. If you would like more information on podcast content, you can always go back to episode 3, which is streamlining your podcast content creation process. Episode 7, which is 5 strategies to never run out of podcast content. And episode 21, how to organize and plan your podcast content. So we've got those ones as my main episodes that are about content, helping you plan that content, helping you create that content, making sure that you never ever run out of content, and then making sure you organize it in a way that is going to be efficient for you to be able to keep producing your podcast, keep showing up for your audience without feeling overwhelmed about that. I want you to take action. So from here, I want you to plan out the next 5 episodes of your show. So I'm not even going to say 10. Just plan out the next 5 episodes of your podcast. Shoot me a DM on Instagram, alicia.galati, and you can say, I did it. Yay, I did it. So let me know. I'm always happy to cheer you on. If you have any questions or need ideas or suggestions, always shoot me a DM too. I am always happy to help and support you guys. I know that this episode is going to be super helpful for helping you plan out your next or first 10 episodes. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Listeners to Leads. If you found something in this episode valuable, I would really appreciate it if you shared it with a friend who you know would also get value from it. Want to send me a message? My favorite place to hang out is Instagram. You can find me at alicia.galati. Let me know what your favorite takeaway was from the episode. And don't forget, turning those listeners into leads is actually easy.